everyone, and welcome to another edition of Zerene Team Talk. It's so exciting. This is our third team talk, all about Zerene and how it can help you to manage your bruxism. I'm joined by the head of software of Zerene, Steve Sulak. And the
Hey,
crowd goes
Lauren.
wild.
Happy to be here.
Hello.
Thanks.
Awesome. Love it. And we're also joined by our newest team member, the Zerene Coach Aja Sulak. How are you, Aja?
Hello, nice to be here.
I love it. And as our newest team member, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Zerene as the very important Zerene coach.
So I am new to the Zerene team officially, but I have been behind the scenes um, for about a year. As you heard my last name, I am Steve's wife, and had kind of talked through him or with him with some things. And then I was asked to join as the coach because the team realized they needed a person to work closely with the beta testers. So what I do is I monitor people's data, their survey results, and just kind of reach out if they have problems. It's one of those things, if you don't hear from me, then that means that you are doing great, you have no issues, and your training is going along really well. But as with all beta tests, there are little issues. I'm there to help. I'm there to give suggestions, answer questions. And if I don't know the answer, I ask Steve because he's the tech guy.
Yes, he's the tech guy and our data wizard as well. So I know you both work closely together, looking at people's feedback, looking at the feedback that comes through the data, and that you're using all of that information to give them customized suggestions to help them get the most out of their Zerene experience, which is a very unique experience for such a device as this. And I think it's very valuable for the people who are benefiting from that. Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, and just to add on that, or at least for me personally, I always like to know that there is a person kind of like there behind the scenes, making sure things are going smoothly. There's, you know, things can get complicated, and it's nice to know there's an expert.
We are not AI
Absolutely.
generated. Actual humans are looking at your data every day to see how you're doing.
Non-AI. Sorry. All right, I love it. So let's jump into our discussion for today. We have a case study about one of our beta users that was a very interesting case. So I'll ask the team to take it away and tell us about the beta user and the interesting things that came out from this study.
So yeah, today we're going to focus on one of our beta users to sort of try to provide a little background about where they were starting from. Whenever anybody starts the beta, we ask them to fill out a survey to kind of just share with us what they know about their current bruxing habits. You know, we ask things like, do you know that you clench or grind your teeth at night? Have you been diagnosed with bruxism? Are you using currently protective devices for your teeth? Do you experience any symptoms? And just the general things you would think would be helpful for setting a baseline. So in the particular case of this user, they noted that they did have jaw pain, tooth pain, and just general, accelerated teeth wear as a result of their bruxism. They had been diagnosed with that as well, and were wearing a night guard to try to manage it. However, they also identified that they hated using it, which is a little bit of tension from a treatment perspective. They knew that they had strong TMJ muscles, kind of as a result of this, which kind of exacerbated, I think, the feelings, the sensations in their face. And another thing that was interesting was they were our first biphasic sleeper. So for people that are not as familiar with that, rather than doing like one long nightly sleep, the sleeps are broken up over the course of the day and done in smaller chunks. And for us as a team, it was exciting to get to work with a user, in that kind of situation. We we weren't really sure with those kind of durations if there was going to be an effect on the training or not. So we were looking forward to seeing it. And Lauren has mentioned that um, to us before this recording, that that's applicable to people in a lot of different work situations. You may not be able to get long segments of sleep, so it helps kind of improve our understanding of another different part of our potential user pool. Um, and yeah, I guess maybe one other thing I would mention is that this particular user had actually tried um, on their own to treat their bruxism in the past. In their line of work, they were familiar with using neurofeedback to try to improve um, or like just change behavior. And so he also had kind of dabbled in training bruxism before, which also made it interesting to work with him. We provided an introduction to one of our beta users a little bit earlier. And so now we're going to provide an introduction to how we work with their data to help them, train and improve their bruxism. And we do that by looking at something called bite effort, which we'll also refer to as Z-score. So on the slide that we're looking at, there's a little cartoon at the bottom, which shows in yellow kind of the axis, which is time going onwards. This represents the data that gets recorded during a session. And then in kind of orange, I have a thing labeled pressure reading. And so as people are using the Zerene device, it measures how hard their teeth are contacting each other. And so we have a pressure reading of that. And then above pressure reading, there's a sort of dashed green line that I call the bite limit. So when people are training, if their teeth engage and bite hard enough to go above the bite limit, the device will apply some haptic feedback by just a little buzz through a motor in order to help the people identify that they're grinding their teeth so that they can stop. And so basically what Zerene, it's an awareness device. It's trying to help people bring attention to the behavior so that they could train out of it. And in our blog, you can probably see examples of research papers that have established that there is actually bruxism is a behavior that is receptive to training through a variety of means. Zerene has
I have a question.
our own special way that we do it. Question from the audience?
Oh,
Yes?
sorry to interrupt. How do you determine the bite limit?
Good question. So typically when people use Zerene, they do the training over a period of time. And what we've kind of done from working with a bunch of users at this point is we've tried to distill down a training program or sequence that helps them to gently start to build this awareness. So the bite limit tends to start high, and then, sorry, my hand is blurry. Over the course of time, the bite limit sort of tightens so that people get aware of the earlier phases of the bite happening. And then the other thing that we adjust during training is the level of feedback provided. Some people are very deep sleepers, and we find that they need higher levels of feedback in order for their biting to get interrupted. And some people are very sensitive sleepers and they prefer it lighter. And that's some of the customizability that there is in the device. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah,
Can I add to that a little bit?
Please do.
Just for the people in the back. So did I understand it correctly? We start with a bite limit that's pretty high, which means that we tolerate a little bit more biting or clenching from the person. before they get the feedback. Then later, we actually make the device more sensitive. So even a small action of clenching or grinding results in a feedback. So we play within those limits to see how much how much of a response we can get from them in terms of reducing their clenching and grinding. Is that about accurate?
Yes, that is correct. And since we are looking at the data to sort of help try to optimize the approach, um, that's kind of like a guideline. It's a rough schedule that's followed, but we tune it to people's individual kind of sleep preferences. Okay, great questions, everybody. The focus kind of this slide is on what happens on like a per night basis, and I do think it's really good to um, understand that like Zerene is not a one and done. Like you don't use it one night at your trade and that's kind of it forever. It's kind of this like evolutionary thing, as you learn and modify your behavior, and then we maybe adopt new strategies to try to help continue to have people approve. So it's very like it's a team kind of effort between Zerene and the user. So to sort of continue with this diagram here, so bite effort is kind of taking into account how hard you're biting and how long you're biting for. And so in this cartoon, I gave a couple examples of that. So the first one is a strong short bite. Sometimes you hear people, their teeth coming together and clicking. This is like teeth engaging quickly, but for a short period of time. And so you can see kind of a rectangle illustrating what that looks like in terms of bite effort. The next one, if you were doing a training session, would get skipped because I carefully drew it to be below the bite limit, which means it wouldn't trigger. And that wouldn't sort of count as your bite effort score because, as you're sleeping, you move, sometimes the pressure will go up, but it's not actually bruxism happening. And we don't want to intervene at that time and bother people. And then the last is kind of a long bite or a clench where it's not high amplitude the way the strong short one was, but it was a very long hold. And so both of those are significant in different ways for like your teeth health and your jaw health and for your overall bruxing. And so those are all kind of incorporated into the training with the device. We hope, with long bites, there are lots of opportunities for the user to stop. So over time, we hope to see the durations of those shrink as people change and their bruxing behavior reduces. Okay, any other questions on this slide before we move on?
Uh, yes, I maybe a question and a comment. There's various things happening here. So I think you had mentioned that the Z-score is kind of the amount of space without if you take away those rectangles or maybe using those rectangles, it kind of calculates the amount of space in those rectangles to
Yeah.
and represents it numerically that way. It comes up with the Z-score that way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thank you. That maybe the last thing to mention is people sleep for different lengths of time. And so the last step we do is we sort of divide all of those added up areas from those different boxes and divide it by the hours slept so that if you only are able to get in 4 hours with Zerene on one day versus you get in 12 hours some other day, we can compare them on a apples to apples basis.
So one of the things that I love about Zerene is that this data, I think, is very interesting and important for people to understand what their behavior is. Because as you've so beautifully shown here, you can really see a short, strong bite versus long bite or clenching. That by itself is very interesting and important information that the z-score might not show you as a numerical value, but you do also have the chance to kind of see that in the data. On the other hand, the z-score gives you an opportunity to see comparatively night after night how much of those little areas are getting added up per hour, so you can comparatively understand your progress during the training, or just how bad or not bad your bruxing, your teeth clenching and grinding is during a study phase. So it's interesting actually to see and have the two and understand what the Z score can show, and also what we need this kind of more raw data approach in order to understand something a little bit deeper, to get a deeper insight into what's happening.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and also one that we talk about, or that comes up quite a bit inside Zerene, is just there is no quantified sort of publicly available data set. Like, people haven't really gone out to collect the raw data so that they could start to, figure out what the patterns are for people. It tends to start at, symptom observation, like dentist sees like something has happened to your teeth, or like somebody complains about pain or discomfort, but we don't know how they get there. And I think understanding how they get there, what their bruxing pattern is, could be really helpful for getting more individualized treatments, which, would be great.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Steve. That's very eye-opening.
So we just, kind of looked at the simplified cartoon view of Zerene data. And so just to like shock us into reality, I thought I would share a graphic of what a real night of sleep looks like. And so we mentioned earlier that this particular user slept in short bursts. So this is like a less than 5 hour period of sleeping. And so you can see a couple different things in it. Since this is over such a large period of time, the bites appear as just these, straight vertical lines, kind of separated from the others. And then periods of clenching and grinding end up looking like little places where you see little bumps or hills in the data, where you see like the tighter groups of the jagged lines. We have software in place that goes through and finds all of these spikes. And then just like how we visually went through the data on the last slide, we assemble all of the areas that each of them represent and add them up to get one z-score for the sleep session. All right, any questions on this one or other things people think should be mentioned before we move on?
I would love if you would talk a little bit more about the clusters, like around 4 a.m., I guess that is, and like around 6,
Yeah,
if you
okay. Sure. So mention a couple other things. I haven't said what the y-axis is, so in case people haven't figured it out, like we are looking at the pressure, the raw pressure reading in units of pascals. People are probably less familiar with them than with like PSI, like on a tire or something like that. 1 PSI is like 7,000 pascals. So there's quite a bit of difference in terms of the unit. And then on the x-axis, we just have the time while the device was recording. So to your, a couple things sort of came up to your question, Lauren. So whenever we see just a vertical line that's kind of in isolation, like that's a bite, and then it goes away. Whenever you see like these clusters, we are looking at a plot that's over the course of hours. So these are extended periods where like there's some kind of like clenching or grinding kind of like activity, like the teeth are kind of engaging on and off. And another thing that we're doing with Zerene is we're investigating how like bruxing is happening in different phases of sleep. And so one of the things that came to mind as part of the answer, Lauren, is like in the less deep phases of sleep, we tend to see more of the kind of biting behavior. And so I think what we're seeing in the plot is the bruxism presenting differently as people are going through like the phases of their sleep. So I would guess there's probably like a sleep phase difference in addition to a behavior difference that we see in the data.
Just to add on to what Steve has mentioned is we can also tell which way people are facing. So sometimes you'll see clusters of bites if they're going through a phase where they're tossing and turning a lot. And when there's a straighter line, sometimes that just means they're not moving, which is probably when they're in a deeper sleep. So there is, for some people, there can be a correlation to moving and biting.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a good point. The sort of focus of the day is on biting, but restlessness of sleep is also something that we look at and can provide back to people as part of using the Zerene device. Okay, cool. So we just talked about Z-score and this like bite effort per hour. So for this particular user, this is the nights that they use Zerene. The blue is when they're in the phase that we call steady, where no feedback is getting applied. We're just trying to measure their normal nightly activity so that we have something to compare to as we start to apply training to make sure we're having a positive effect. The green bars are places where feedback is being used. And as we talked about earlier, that follows a schedule, but the user has the ability to adjust it to what works best for them. And in this particular case, they also did. So Zerene is sort of intended to work, with people's lives. So you can see, this started back in September and it went all the way to November because, travel and other life things were happening, and that's fine. It just picks up wherever you left off. So in this particular case, after going through the initial baseline period, we went through a sequence of training over the course of about 14 nights. Typically, after we do training, we start to have people just use the device in study mode so that we can see if the training, had taken, like how durable it was. In the case of this user, because they did have a tendency to want to use it at a lower feedback strength, we asked them to do a couple more nights where they boosted it up. And we saw that the numbers got a little bit lower, but they were already pretty low to begin with. And then because this user took very short sleeps, I'd also sort of called out a few days where the device had been removed, but we sort of found that it didn't really throw off the data in their particular case. They still sort of aligned. So one of the things that we're doing is kind of just sanity checking to make sure the results make sense for people as we go through it. So that's kind of the explanation. In terms of the takeaways, we take the initial baseline and we kind of throw out the high and the low, and we sort of consider that an average. So over here on the left is the baseline period. And then in training, we kind of look at the last nights to see how far they made it. And we can compare, what they're doing at the end of their training versus where they started. And then we also look at durability by having them use it for some number of weeks after it completes. And so if you kind of like freeze your memory of this a little bit, what I did is I took those groupings that I just pointed out and I put them together so that we could do the comparison. So we took the average of each colored group and we just, you know, divided them to see what the improvement was. So this particular user was displaying 86.4% less z-score or bite effort at the end of their training. And when they did multiple weeks of study afterwards, they were also showing, you know, 62.7% improvement was maintained compared to the beginning. We don't know how long the training is durable for. We're trying to cover like a very broad and diverse group with our studies just to make sure it has broad applicability. What we're looking at right now is for people that go even longer, like how long that effect lasts for and how different it is from user to user. Any questions or other things people would like to bring up on this one before I move on?
Uh, yeah, just a really fast, I think, comment about what does training durability mean? Because I just wonder if people might see the word durability and think about, other things, not think about training
Yeah,
necessarily as being durable and what that means.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think good substitutes or synonyms, you know, would be hold or you know, persistence. Um, you know, when people use Zerene, you know, we're looking at their data. And so what we see is that the amplitude of the bites drops and that the number of them also decreases. And we'll see that with some other slides that we have coming up. Um, but but yeah, basically it just means that there was a, you know, measurable change to those behaviors, like how often people were biting and how strong they were biting. Okay, cool. And then one other thing, you know, since we have been looking at, or we have sort of built up a pool of beta testers, one of the things we share with people is, you know, sort of how you compare to other folks that also are dealing with bruxism. And so in this particular case, you know, this user had started, you know, kind of a little bit at the low end. In terms of how we measure bruxism, we're continuing to sort of improve and like biting behaviors that we see. But in this particular case, the way that we measure it for the pool, and then after training, they improved quite a bit. Um, and also the pool improved quite a bit. Like on average, we see people reducing their bruxism behaviors after training. We talked about providing feedback. So I wanted to provide another example that kind of shows that. So you've already seen this blue graph with all of the spikes with the pressure data. We've now added a couple things to it. So there's now a green line, which is intended to kind of show like what the device would be doing normally, like if people weren't biting on top of it. And then we have this orange line, which is the threshold, which is the bite limit that we had on the cartoon earlier. And then down below, we show the Zerene intervening. So in the particular case of this user, they started the night. After their first bite, they decided to lower the pressure, and then they used that for the rest of the night. And so what we like to see with this is whenever the motor intervenes, that we don't see groups and clusters and lots of activity. You can see that it was obviously the user was still biting some. If we were to compare this between nights, we would then be able to see the differences that were coming during training. This actually was early in their training period as well. But it's just kind of an example of what what the data that we see as we're working with people's bruxism. Any questions or comments on this one before we move on?
Yes, I was going to say, besides that, it's very interesting to see. I guess this is an important way that the coach kind of is a partner with the user. Even just knowing these things, like they lowered the I guess the threshold, uh, or they raised the threshold, did they, that night after the first bite? Like they decided it was too sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I see in this particular plot is there was a spike at the beginning that was higher down on the motor duty plot, and then it went down to 40 for the rest of it. So it looked like it got dropped a little bit. Um,
Which is the strength of the vibration. So they made the
yeah,
vibration a little bit softer per their
yeah.
preferences.
I think in
Hmm.
this case, it looks like they left the threshold the same for the night, but those are two things that are, real time during the session parameters that they can change if they'd like. And yes, when we see people expressing themselves, sort of through their data, we get an opportunity to reach out to them, ask what was going well, what kind of things they were looking to change, and then make sure that, you know, they they can use the device as effectively as possible for them. The other, um, we can see, we keep track of that as well. So on the top, we have bytes per hour. And we like to see this where, we're seeing more bytes during the initial baselining than we are during the training. Like in the case of this user, they were kind of getting down to the point where they were only having like one-ish, on most of the nights that they were sleeping per hour, which is great. And then in the bottom one, we just have the total number of byte events, not taking how long the sleep is into account. So, we can look at kind of on a nightly basis as well as sort of, you know, on average, like kind of what the trends are for a user. So yeah, in general, like, this was an example of a good response. We saw more activity at the beginning going towards less activity at the end. We break down the bite effort into different strength categories. So as it goes down, we see the bite effort increasing. So it's just the strength of it. So how hard the teeth are coming together. And what we like to see for people is the bottom rows emptying out. That means that the strength of the bites is decreasing over time. And so the fact that like there was very little activity in the bottom, and then the second from the bottom also was getting sparser over time. We want the activity to flow, up into the lower uh, buckets. So the top one is everything put together. That was the same as kind of what we were looking at earlier. And then, so just to reiterate, this is sort of light biting, this is medium strength biting, and then this is strong biting. So this user had very little strong biting, little medium biting compared to the beginning. And then even their sort of like weak biting had also decreased. And then once someone has sort of run through a schedule of training, we kind of look at their data patterns to see, what was successful for them. So this plot shows the motor duty cycle, which is the feedback strength on the top, and then the biting threshold on the bottom. And so we kind of generate these scatter plots over here to the right so that we can get a sense of what's effective for people. So this user preferred their feedback kind of being in this area, which was one thing we could see from the data. The other thing we could see is that generally there's a slope downwards towards the left with bite threshold. So as people go through the course of the scheduled treatment, we can kind of, see their results and then get a sense of which combination of parameters sort of works best for them. So this is just kind of one of the ways the coach behind the scenes is taking, keeping an eye on how things are going and steering people towards a point of using the device where they're getting a good effect. And I think that's it for me. Any questions on any of these or things that didn't get covered?
Actually, that was a lot of information.
It was.
Very interesting information. And what comes to mind is that I can imagine a lot of people loving to see all of this and really nerding out over knowing more about themselves and what they do during a period of time when we often don't know what's going on. But I could also see where, for some people, they're like, I just want the result, I just want the good things to happen. I just want to have better sleep. I want to have better teeth and jaw health and have a better life. So I wonder, Aja, can you talk a little bit how, as the coach, as this is all happening in real time, you're helping to take all of this incredible wealth of information and distill it down to like actions and results.
So as someone is going through the training, I do look at the data, and if things are trending in the right way, then we really won't intervene too much because um, it's working for you. And so we don't want to change things too dramatically. But for this beta user specifically, they had a much lower motor duty because they didn't like the strong vibrations. And I think they were okay with where it was, but just as to kind of see like a little bit of an experiment, we did ask them to do 2 extra nights of training with a higher motor duty because we kind of wanted to see if it made a significant improvement. And in this case, it actually did lower the numbers. They were already pretty low, but even more. So that was something I actually told the user was that, if you can tolerate this higher feedback, it is actually reducing your numbers even more. He chose not to. He preferred the lower. I can work with the person and say, hey, if you change this setting, you do get these results. If you're okay with that, you could do that to, improve your results even more. And then the person can say, I don't like it. It doesn't, it interrupts my sleep too much. Or, hey, I, was afraid to try that. And now that I did, it worked really well. So that's kind of where I can come in and make suggestions for tweaking the settings a little bit, and then the user can try it for a night and see how it goes, and then we can come back and discuss whether it was effective for them, and I can look at the numbers and be like, oh, it didn't make a big difference, so don't interrupt your sleep, or it did actually make a big difference, so maybe try it for a few nights and see if you get used to it. And then as Steve was explaining, the bite limit does start to come down. So, at some point, maybe you can make a happy medium.
I love that. It's sounds like it's highly customizable, highly personalized,
Mhm.
um, very sensitive to the needs of every user. And not only that, but the goals of every user, because like you said, this user had the option to go, I'm okay with a little bit more biting and not having to feel the stronger vibrations at
Yeah.
night.
And on the flip side, it also doesn't have to be highly customizable. That is an option for people who want to be more involved. But the way the training is set up is that um, it will adjust the settings along with your training. So you don't have to customize it if that's a little too much, but the option is there. Did I say that right, Steve?
Um, yeah, it has a program that it can take you through, like if that's what you want. Um, and like we have the data to kind of back up the effectiveness, and we can offer that counsel and let people incorporate it into their lives and sleeping patterns as works best for them. So I think I just said the same thing that you said, but just in my words.
Yeah. Yeah, just
In
saying
Steve terms.
yeah, if you want to get in and play with the settings, you can. If you don't want to, you just want to put it in and sleep, that is also an option.
Yeah. Um, and then I don't know if this is a good time to sort of offer it, but like we did go very deep into numbers land for a little bit there. But because this is a beta study, we do a lot of interaction with our users, like extra interaction than we kind of expect maybe to be seen after we launch. This particular user, uh, used Zerene for more than 100 hours during their different nights of use. And we were super grateful for that. They also submitted more than 20 surveys to sort of tell us how things were going and also to help improve the device. And when people kind of complete the beta study period, we do kind of this exit interview with them so that we could kind of try to get their impressions, their highlights, their lowlights, and just continue to improve the product. So to sort of like step away from the data and more into the what did it mean, from a quality of life perspective. I'd mentioned earlier that the user did not like the night guard that they had before starting Zerene use. One of the things they really liked about Zerene was that they found it very unobtrusive. We didn't look at a picture of it, but rather than being a big bulky mouth guard, it's like a fitted soft plastic mouth guard because it doesn't need to be as bulky because it's actually helping you actively stop biting. So in his particular case, like he got used to the device really quickly, didn't find it to be obstructing his sleep at all, which was great. Um, when he was using it, he felt less symptoms of TMJ, less headaches. He thought he felt like he was biting less, just sort of as a result of it, and sort of taking it all together. Like his perception of the experience was that the intervention was effective. Like he was able to see an improvement in his day to day life as a result of participating in the study and doing the training with Zerene. When the data and the user experience kind of lines up, it helps us feel like we're headed in the right direction with the product.
This user asked the question whether his reduction in symptoms was due to simply wearing a mouth guard, which is something that he didn't like doing and hadn't been doing consistently despite the dentist recommendation, or whether it was actually due to the training intervention that the Zerene provided. And the interesting thing was that the data showed between the study period where there's no feedback, so it's just like he was just wearing a regular mouth guard, and the training period, that decrease in the Z score or bite effort. So, while many people may have this same question or wonder, oh, I was wearing my mouth guard and something about my symptoms improved. And could you improve those symptoms more with the use of Zerene? Are there other things happening that you're not aware of because the headache went away, but actually you're still um, doing an action that is not good for your teeth and your jaws? It is interesting to see in this data, and also comparing, as you were saying, with the user experience, Steve, how our experience is important. And for us as a company, we want to be improving people's life, quality of sleep, reducing pain, and etc. That's very important. And also, we have the huge benefit of this data that gives us even more insight. Well, maybe your pain was reduced, but we could reduce it further with this. Maybe your pain was reduced, but we could improve the likelihood that you're going to have healthy teeth and jaws with this treatment as well. And you will see that in numbers happening. Um,
Yeah. And yeah, I really like the way you're saying that, Lauren. And it just made me want to add in really quick that, like, you know, it's so nice to bring agency into this process, right? It's really hard to stick with even a self-care routine when you just don't know. Um, and so I think, yeah, being able to bring like objective data and sort of like also seeing like people's subjective experience of their symptoms, improving. I think that's kind of a unique combination.
Basically, Zerene is amazing. Zerene is amazing. The Zerene team is amazing. It's really, that's the bottom line. So, okay, does anybody want to add anything more? Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, exactly. Steve drops mic and we cut the podcast. So, thank you so much, both of you, for lending your time and expertise to this. And I just hope that the many people who suffer with teeth clenching and grinding will find this information useful and also hopeful for their own situation. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.